Breaking news. MS Now has just learned that FBI Director Kash Patel may be out of a job in the coming months. 3 people with knowledge of the situation say President Trump and his top aides have grown tired of Patel and the unflattering headlines he's been generating recently, including using a government jet to visit his girlfriend and enlisting a SWAT team as her security detail. Joining us, MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delanian and MS Now White House reporter Laura Barone Lopez. Both of them broke this story along with Carol Leonnig. Ken, give me more.
Well, Katie, I should say, first of all the qualifiers apply here. With Donald Trump and personnel decisions, you never actually know exactly what's going on. But we are being told that Kash Patel, the FBI director, is on increasingly thin ice. And the president is considering replacing him by the end of the year with Andrew Bailey, the former Attorney General of Missouri, who is acting now as co-deputy FBI director, along with Dan Bongino. And it's for all the reasons that you just said and others.
Welcome back to another John podcast episode. FBI Director Kash Patel faces mounting legal peril from federal lawsuits filed by former top FBI leaders whose sworn testimony alleges misconduct in private conversations. While Patel has not been arrested or charged, the accumulating evidence suggests the legal walls may be closing in on Trump's personally appointed FBI chief. According to these sworn legal filings, Patel admitted to these former officials that he knew the purge he was carrying out was likely illegal. He acknowledged that firing agents solely for working on Trump-related investigations violated FBI rules and federal law. But he did it anyway. Why? Because his job depended on it. Because Trump hadn't forgotten that the FBI tried to investigate him. Because the president demanded loyalty above all else. And Patel apparently was more concerned with keeping his position than with following the law. This is testimony given under oath in federal court.
The use of taxpayer resources, the flying his girlfriend around on the FBI jet, but also the premature tweets, including related to the Charlie Kirk assassination and other investigations, that terrorist attack in Michigan where Patel got out in front of the investigation and tweeted about the arrests before the rest of the government was ready for that to happen. So Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche of the Justice Department have been annoyed with Patel for a long time, although they've publicly denied it when others have reported it. And now it's increasingly clear that the White House is as well. Now, our reporting this may actually enhance his job security, right? So it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen, but that is the reporting at this hour, Katie.
Yeah, no, we have seen situations where when it comes out that somebody is being considered for removal in order to prove that that Donald Trump does not have any chaos on his team or in his cabinet, has come out and said, no, of course not. I'm not considering anything. Let me play the president a little bit earlier today talking about Kash Patel during the Turkey pardon.
This is not anonymous gossip or leaked documents that could be disputed. This is former FBI officials staking their credibility on specific factual allegations about what Patel said to them in private moments. And this testimony creates an evidentiary record that could absolutely be used for perjury charges or criminal prosecution. If Patel lied to Congress during his confirmation about his intentions, or if investigators determined that his conduct violated federal law, the foundation for criminal charges is already being built. What makes this situation particularly explosive is the nature of the allegations themselves. We're talking about the director of the FBI allegedly telling subordinates that he has to carry out a political purge, that he has to remove anyone connected to investigations of the president, that Trump wants revenge against the Bureau for daring to investigate him, and that Patel's own job security depends on executing this agenda regardless of whether it's
FBI Director Kash Patel has been very busy and doing a great job. Also, thank you, Kash.
Was that scripted? Was that always intended to be there, or was he responding to a question, Laura?
Look, I will say that right before we went out there for that Turkey pardon, I had asked the White House for comment on this story. And so because sources had been telling me, those that were talking to Carol and Ken were also telling us that essentially this ouster could be closer than ever. And part of that is because Andrew Bailey would now be able to take that role after reaching this 90-day requirement for being in that position. And so the White House had responded to me right before this event started. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson, not denying it outright, not calling this false, but she did say that the FBI Director Patel is a critical member of the president's team and that he's working tirelessly to ensure the integrity of the FBI. That's what Abigail Jackson, the White House spokeswoman, said. And then after that, I went out there for the turkey pardon into the Rose Garden. And I thought it was interesting that the president said,
legal. This isn't just bad judgment or aggressive personnel management. This is potentially criminal retaliation against federal employees for doing their jobs. This is violation of civil service protections that have existed for decades. This is the kind of conduct that can land someone in prison if prosecutors decide to bring charges. And the specificity of the allegations matters enormously. The lawsuits name names. They provide dates. They describe conversations in detail. They allege that Patel explicitly acknowledged the illegality of what he was doing and then went ahead and did it anyway. The documents and reporting that have emerged paint a picture of systematic targeting. Patel and his allies in the administration didn't just fire agents randomly. They specifically targeted people who had worked on January 6th investigations, people who had worked on the classified documents case, people who had worked on any investigation that Trump viewed as part of what he called the witch hunt against him. These weren't problem employees. These weren't people with performance issues or disciplinary problems. These were experienced, dedicated professionals who were doing exactly what the FBI is supposed to do, investigating potential crimes regardless of who's involved, and they were fired specifically because they had done their jobs in ways that Trump didn't like. That's textbook abuse of power.
Thanked him and said that he was doing a, quote, great job. And then there was some clapping and the president said, see, Kash, you have a following. So was it scripted? That's the timing when it happened. But this appears closer than it's ever been before because, of course, sources close to the White House have told me that they've definitely heard grumblings about Patel for all the reasons that Ken laid out. But this time around, more because of the back-to-back bad headlines about Patel's use of government resources seems to really be pushing those around the president and allies to the edge when it comes to Patel, Katie.
Yeah, what's interesting, Ken, is if we think about the first administration and when cabinet members had been ousted, a lot of them had been accused of mishandling or misusing government funds, misusing government planes, a version of corruption, and I guess this would fall into the same category. If you're talking about the SWAT team and the using the private jet, at the very least, just a misuse or an unseemly use of government property.
That's exactly the kind of conduct that civil service protections are designed to prevent. And it's precisely the kind of thing that can result in both civil liability through these lawsuits and criminal prosecution if the retaliation was egregious enough and if there's evidence of corrupt intent. There's another dimension to this story that makes it even more legally dangerous for Patel: the perjury risk. During his confirmation hearings, Patel was asked directly about whether he would retaliate against agents who had worked on Trump investigations. He assured senators that he would not engage in political retaliation. He promised to follow FBI policies and federal law. He emphasized the importance of keeping the Bureau independent from political pressure. But now we have multiple witnesses saying under oath that Patel told them the exact opposite in private, that he was firing people specifically because they worked Trump cases, that he knew it was illegal but did it anyway, that his job depended on carrying out this political purge.
Yes, and the SWAT team reference, just to make sure our viewers understand, goes back to our reporting that members of the SWAT team in Nashville have been deployed as a security detail for Kash Patel's country singer girlfriend who lives in Nashville. And the New York Times has reported that other SWAT details from other cities have also been enlisted in that cause. What's also interesting, and you're absolutely right, Katie, that those kinds of things, that Donald Trump has a track record of looking on with distaste and disdain. But what's also interesting is that Kash Patel is under fire from MAGA activists for things that probably our viewers are not paying attention to. There's a series of conspiracy theories, for example, about the January 6th pipe bombs. That case remains unsolved. A lot of people in the MAGA world have these unfounded beliefs that somehow the government was involved, that the FBI is covering up. up. And Kash Patel and Dan Bongino have not been as forthcoming as these people would like about that case. So they're mad about that. They were also angry the other day when they essentially leaked a story to Fox News, or did an interview with Fox News, and laid out their findings in the assassination plot against Donald Trump, and essentially said,
if those allegations are true, then what Patel told Congress during his confirmation was a lie. And lying to Congress under oath is perjury. It's a federal crime that can result in prison time. The challenge in proving perjury is showing that the person knowingly made a false statement, not just that they were mistaken or later changed their mind. But when you have sworn testimony from multiple witnesses saying Patel made specific admissions about the illegal nature of the firings, when you have a documented pattern of firings that align exactly with what witnesses say Patel told them he was going to do, when you have Patel's own book laying out his agenda to purge disloyal employees, that's pretty compelling evidence that what he told Congress wasn't just mistaken, it was deliberately false. Patel's own book, Government Gangsters, has become a critical piece of evidence in this unfolding saga. He literally wrote a book before becoming FBI director, where he talked about how career federal employees are gangsters who need to be removed, how the deep state is undermining conservative presidents, how there needs to be a wholesale purge of people who aren't loyal to the president's agenda. This isn't some secret conspiracy theory that the plaintiffs are making up. Patel telegraphed exactly what he was going to do in his own published work. And now the agents he fired are pointing to that book and saying, look, he told you this was always about political loyalty rather than job performance. He had a premeditated plan to purge the FBI of anyone he viewed as disloyal. We have proof through his own words that this was politically motivated retaliation. If Patel had kept his mouth shut and not published a book telegraphing exactly what he was planning to do, the legal case against him would be harder to prove. You'd have to show political motivation through circumstantial evidence, but Patel gave prosecutors a roadmap by literally writing down his plans and publishing them for the world to see. And now the people he fired are using his own words against him. Let me walk you through exactly what the former FBI officials are alleging because the details are genuinely stunning. In September, 3 former top FBI leaders filed a federal lawsuit against Patel. We're talking about former acting FBI Director Brian Driscoll and 2 other senior officials. These are not random low-level agents with some grudge. These are people who held the highest positions in the Bureau. And according to their sworn complaint, Patel told Driscoll directly that his job as FBI Director depended on removing anyone tied to investigations of Trump. He allegedly said that the FBI tried to put the president in jail, and he hasn't forgotten it. The FBI director allegedly telling a subordinate that he has to carry out a political purge because otherwise Trump will fire him, explicitly connecting it to Trump's desire for revenge against the FBI for investigating him. That's the kind of admission that prosecutors dream about. It shows consciousness of guilt. It shows criminal intent. You don't have to prove Patel should have known his conduct was illegal. You can prove he actually did know and just didn't care. And when you combine that admission with the actual firings that followed, when you can show that Patel said this is probably illegal and then went ahead and fired all these agents anyway, that's a really strong foundation for criminal charges. Violating federal employment law, obstruction of justice if any of the fired agents were involved in ongoing investigations, potentially conspiracy if Patel was coordinating with Trump or other White House officials to carry out this purge. The details of who got fired and why also really matter. They show a clear pattern of political retaliation rather than legitimate personnel decisions based on performance or misconduct. According to the lawsuits and congressional reporting, Patel systematically targeted agents who had worked on investigations involving the former president. Anyone who had been involved in looking at January 6th, anyone who had worked on the classified documents case, anyone who had done their job by investigating potential crimes that involved Trump. These were experienced professionals being fired not because they were bad at their jobs, but because they had done exactly what the FBI is supposed to do. There's another lawsuit that adds even more weight to the case against Patel. A group of agents who were fired after kneeling during racial justice protests in 2020 have also filed suit. These agents are accusing Patel, along with Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, of purging what they call woke or disloyal agents. Essentially, anyone who Patel perceived as not being sufficiently loyal to Trump or who might undermine the president's agenda. This lawsuit also cites Patel's book as evidence that he had this agenda all along. When you look at both lawsuits together, you see a consistent pattern. Patel wasn't just firing people for one reason. He was systematically removing anyone he viewed as politically problematic, anyone who had investigated Trump, anyone who had expressed support for social justice causes, anyone who might be seen as disloyal. It was a comprehensive purge designed to reshape the FBI into a tool of political loyalty rather than a law enforcement agency. Now, Patel's defenders will probably argue that as FBI director, he has broad authority over personnel decisions, that he's allowed to fire people, that there's nothing necessarily illegal about making staffing changes to align the Bureau with the president's priorities. And in some narrow sense, that's true. FBI directors do have significant authority over personnel matters. They are political appointees who serve at the pleasure of the president. But there are limits to that authority, and one of the most important limits is that you can't fire people for political reasons or as retaliation for them doing their jobs. Federal civil service law is really clear about this. You can't terminate or discipline employees because they worked on politically sensitive investigations. You can't punish them for exercising their First Amendment rights. You can't use personnel decisions as a tool for political retaliation. And if Patel really did tell people that he was firing agents because they investigated Trump, if he really did admit that the firings were probably illegal, but he had to do it to keep his job, that blows through all of those legal protections. The perjury risk that Patel is facing deserves serious attention. During his confirmation hearing, he was asked directly about whether he would use his position to retaliate against agents who had worked on Trump investigations. He gave assurances that he would not engage in political retaliation. He promised to follow FBI policies and federal law. He talked about the importance of keeping the Bureau independent from political pressure. But now we have witnesses saying under oath that Patel told them the exact opposite in private. That he was firing agents specifically because they worked Trump cases, that he knew it was illegal but did it anyway, that his job depended on carrying out this political purge. If those allegations are true and there's a growing body of evidence supporting them, then Patel lied to Congress during his confirmation. And lying to Congress during a confirmation hearing is perjury. It's a federal crime. The evidence is coming from multiple directions. Sworn testimony from former officials, congressional documents, Patel's own book, all pointing toward the same conclusion. Congress is absolutely on to this as well. NBC News and other outlets are reporting that Patel is facing repeated congressional grillings over these firings. Democrats are openly suggesting that he knowingly broke the law. They're warning that if courts or Congress find he lied under oath during his confirmation or during subsequent oversight hearings, he could face referrals for perjury or obstruction. These aren't empty threats. Congressional committees have the power to make criminal referrals to the Department of Justice when they believe someone has lied to them under oath. And while Trump's DOJ probably won't prosecute Trump's FBI director, those referrals become really important if the political landscape changes. If Democrats win the midterms and take control of the House, you can bet one of their first moves will be dragging Patel before committees to testify again, asking him detailed questions about what he told the former officials who have already testified against him, setting him up for additional perjury charges if he lies again or contradicts his previous testimony. The documentation that's being compiled is really important because it creates an official congressional record that prosecutors can use later. It's not just the civil lawsuits generating evidence. It's also Congress, through its oversight function, creating this parallel track of documentation about Patel's conduct. The House Judiciary Committee documents that have been made public include testimonies and exhibits related to the FBI firings. Democrats are building a comprehensive record of what Patel said publicly versus what he did privately, and what witnesses say he admitted in private conversations. The more evidence that piles up from multiple sources all telling the same story, the harder it becomes for Patel to claim this is all just a partisan witch hunt. The evidence is coming from too many different directions. Fired agents saying Patel admitted the firings were illegal. Congressional documents showing contradictions between his public statements and his private conduct. His own book laying out his agenda. It's all pointing in the same direction. Let me explain why Patel should be genuinely scared of arrest even though it hasn't happened yet. The legal mechanics here are really important to understand. Right now, Patel is protected by the fact that Trump controls the Department of Justice. Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is not going to prosecute Trump's FBI director for carrying out what was essentially Trump's agenda. Even if there's overwhelming evidence that Patel committed crimes, even if congressional committees make criminal referrals, even if courts find in the civil lawsuits that Patel violated federal law, none of that translates into arrest or prosecution as long as Trump is in power and his people control the Justice Department. But the moment that changes, the moment Democrats potentially take Congress in the midterms, or the moment Trump eventually leaves office and a new administration takes over, suddenly all of this evidence that's being compiled becomes the basis for criminal prosecution. Unlike some political scandals where evidence degrades over time or witnesses' memories fade, this evidence is being preserved in real time through court filings and congressional records and sworn testimony. The case against Patel is basically being built while he's still in office. It's just waiting for the political circumstances to change so it can be prosecuted. And Patel has to know this. He's a lawyer. He understands how the system works. He can read these court filings and see that former FBI officials are providing detailed sworn testimony about his admissions that the firings were illegal. He can see that Democrats in Congress are compiling perjury referrals and building the record for future prosecution. He can see that his own book is being used as evidence of premeditation and political motivation. All of this has to be terrifying for someone in his position because he's not just facing potential civil liability from the lawsuits. He's facing potential criminal prosecution for perjury, for violating federal employment law, for obstruction if any of the firings interfered with ongoing investigations, for conspiracy if he was coordinating with the White House to carry out the purge. The protection he currently has from Trump only lasts as long as Trump has power, which means Patel's freedom potentially depends on Republicans holding Congress in the midterms and Trump serving out his term. If either of those things doesn't happen, if Democrats take power, or if Trump loses his grip on the executive branch, Patel could very realistically be looking at arrest and prosecution for everything he's done as FBI director. That's a terrifying position to be in. Your freedom depends on events that are entirely outside your control. You're trusting that the political winds won't shift. You're trusting that your protector will remain in power. And if history is any guide, trusting Donald Trump to protect you when things get tough is a really bad bet. Let me zoom out and talk about what the Patel situation tells us about Trump's broader revenge agenda, because there's a really clear pattern in Trump's orbit that's been playing out for years now. Trump demands loyalty. He orders people to do legally questionable things. And when those people get caught or face legal pressure, Trump distances himself and leaves them hanging. We saw it with Michael Cohen, who went to prison for crimes he committed at Trump's direction. We saw it with the lawyers who flipped in Georgia after being charged with trying to overturn the election. And now we're potentially seeing it with Patel, who allegedly carried out an illegal FBI purge to keep Trump happy, and who now might end up taking the fall for it through perjury charges and criminal prosecution, while Trump claims plausible deniability. You can connect Patel's situation directly to the broader pattern we've been seeing throughout Trump's second term. The whole agenda of weaponizing federal law enforcement for political purposes, of using government power to punish enemies and protect allies, of demanding absolute loyalty and carrying out revenge against anyone who Trump thinks crossed him. Patel is the enforcer for a lot of this at the FBI level. He's the guy systematically purging agents who investigated Trump. He's the guy creating these loyalty tests where your job depends on whether you're sufficiently devoted to the president's agenda rather than on whether you're doing good work and following the law. And this fits the same pattern as what we've seen with other administration officials, all part of a comprehensive effort to bend every institution to Trump's will, regardless of what the law says or what democratic norms require. But the problem with being the enforcer is that enforcers are expendable. When things go wrong, when the legal pressure builds up, when somebody needs to take the fall, it's the enforcers who get sacrificed while the person at the top tries to claim plausible deniability. And Patel is in exactly that position now. The fired FBI official's testimony makes it really clear that Patel was acting on Trump's desires. He allegedly told Driscoll that Trump hasn't forgotten that the FBI tried to put him in jail, that his job depended on removing people who investigated Trump. Patel was clearly carrying out Trump's revenge agenda. He was doing what Trump wanted him to do as FBI director. But if Patel ends up facing criminal charges, if he gets arrested after Trump leaves office, or if Democrats take Congress and start aggressive investigations, do you really think Trump is going to stand by him and protect him? Or is Trump going to do what he always does, which is claim he barely knew the guy? He didn't order any illegal firings. Patel must have misunderstood what was expected of him. It's very sad, but Patel broke the law and has to face consequences. The bipartisan nature of some of the outrage over the FBI purge is also significant. Yes, most of the congressional pressure is coming from Democrats, but you've also got former FBI officials from across the political spectrum expressing concern about the politicization of the Bureau under Patel's leadership. Career law enforcement people who aren't particularly partisan, but who recognize that what Patel is doing violates the whole principle of keeping law enforcement independent from political pressure. That makes it harder for Patel to dismiss all of this as just a partisan witch hunt. When people who should be on your side are also raising concerns, when the criticism is coming from former colleagues who know how the FBI is supposed to operate, that's a sign that you've crossed real lines rather than just made political enemies. For prosecutors or congressional investigators deciding whether to pursue Patel aggressively, having this kind of broad-based concern makes it easier to justify going after him hard. The midterm timing makes all of this even more consequential. If Democrats win Congress in November, Patel becomes one of the highest priority targets for investigation and oversight. You'd see immediate hearings demanding Patel testify about the firings, about what Trump told him, about whether he lied during his confirmation. You'd see subpoenas for internal FBI communications showing how firing decisions were made and who was involved. You'd see the fired officials brought before Congress to repeat their sworn testimony publicly, with cameras rolling and the whole country watching. All of that would generate massive headlines about Trump weaponizing the FBI, about Patel admitting he knew the firings were illegal, about the systematic purge of agents who did their jobs by investigating Trump. That's devastating for Republicans heading into the next presidential election. And it creates enormous pressure on Trump to either defend Patel publicly, which associates Trump directly with illegal conduct, or to throw Patel under the bus, which makes Trump look disloyal and might encourage other officials to flip. And here's the ultimate irony of Patel's situation. He's potentially going to face serious legal consequences for carrying out the exact agenda he laid out in his own book. Government Gangsters was Patel's manifesto about how the deep state needs to be purged, how career employees who aren't loyal to conservative presidents are undermining the country, how there needs to be wholesale removal of people who resist the president's agenda. And now that book is being used as evidence against him in court, showing that he had premeditated plans to politicize the FBI, that this wasn't just about making legitimate personnel decisions, but about carrying out a political purge. If Patel had just kept his mouth shut and not published a book telegraphing exactly what he was planning to do, the legal case against him would be harder to prove. But Patel gave prosecutors a roadmap by literally writing down his plans and publishing them for the world to see. Now, the agents he fired are using his own words against him. That's got to be one of the most self-defeating moves in recent political history. Writing a book about how you're going to purge your enemies and then actually doing it and being surprised when the people you purged use your book as evidence that you violated the law. There's also the question of what happens to other Trump officials who are in similar positions. People who've been ordered to do legally questionable things to carry out Trump's agenda and who might face consequences if the political winds shift. If Patel ends up being prosecuted or facing serious legal consequences for carrying out the FBI purge, that sends a message to everyone else in the administration. Loyalty to Trump isn't actually protection against future criminal liability. Other officials who've been pressuring the Fed or slow-walking transparency requirements or executing aggressive policies that might violate the law, they're all watching what happens to Patel. They're thinking, okay, if he can get charged even though he was just doing what Trump wanted, maybe I should be more careful about what orders I follow. Maybe I should be documenting that I raised legal concerns. Maybe I should be protecting myself rather than assuming Trump will protect me. That dynamic could actually undermine Trump's ability to carry out his more aggressive plans because people become less willing to stick their necks out when they see that the enforcers end up taking the fall. So when you put it all together, the sworn testimony from multiple former FBI officials saying Patel admitted the firings were illegal, the perjury risk from contradictions between his confirmation testimony and his private admissions, his own book providing evidence of political motivation, the congressional pressure building toward criminal referrals, the cooperation deals, and evidence that will survive Trump's presidency. You can see why Patel should be genuinely scared of arrest, even though it hasn't happened yet. The foundation is being laid for criminal prosecution the moment the political circumstances allow it. Patel has to know that his freedom currently depends on Trump staying in power and Republicans holding Congress. If either of those things changes, if Democrats take control and start serious investigations, if Trump eventually leaves office and a new DOJ takes over, Patel could very realistically be looking at arrest and prosecution for everything he's done. The really tragic part for Patel is that he did all of this to keep Trump happy, to keep his job, to prove his loyalty. And if history is any guide, the moment Patel becomes more liability than asset, the moment it becomes politically expedient for Trump to distance himself, Trump will throw Patel under the bus without a second thought, just like he's done to everyone else who got in legal trouble while carrying out his agenda. That's the price of being Trump's enforcer. You take all the legal risk, you carry out the controversial policies, and when things go wrong, you're the one facing prison, while Trump moves on to the next loyalist who's willing to sacrifice themselves for his benefit. Patel thought he was securing his position by doing Trump's bidding. He might have just been securing his own place in a future criminal prosecution. The legal walls are closing in, and there's no one coming to save him when they finally come down.